We are building Super Asteroids. This is week 8 for interactive scripting, spring 2018. We are building Super Asteroids, which should be a good evolution of what we've been making so far in this class. So I think I'm going to we'll be laser focused, and we'll build the ship first. I am going to build a cube, make sure it's centered to 0, and then 1, and then 0. So it's slightly above the world in case we want to put a plane down and put some stars on it or something like that. Let's see, directional light, you are just in my way, so go up there. And then in order to give it a direction, I'm going to duplicate this cube, rotate it 45 degrees, I think. And then make it smaller. Let's go global. Oops. So it looks like the scale to get this close. For my angled cube, the position is -0.5. Actually, it might want to be +0.5. Okay, so this is going to be important to know which way is forward. Okay, so X is the red axis, Y is the vertical green axis, and Z, which is forward and backwards, is this blue axis here. So I'm actually needing to move this guy here. So let's make sure we get forward set just the right way. 0, there, 0, and 0.5. So 0.5 on the Z puts it slightly forward. And I can give it some derpy colors just for fun. Let's go ahead and while we're at it, select our main camera. Let's pick a view that looks good. What do you think? Should it be behind the... I guess it just doesn't matter since it's going to go equally in every direction. But if you press Control-Shift-F when you have the viewpoint the way you want, you can move the camera, as long as the camera's selected, you can move the camera to the position that you're looking at. And if you want to use the values that I had for my forward cube, it looks like this. Once you've got that set up, let's go ahead and build a player controller script. by going to add component. Oh, make sure you add it to the player. I'm going to make sure that this original cube is called player, and that the forward, like front-facing cube is called, what do you think, front? And then I'm going to drag it to be a child of the player so that I don't have to see it and accidentally add scripts to it. So add component player controller, not with slash. And so it's my opinion that if we're playing Asteroids, then we're dealing with physics, and we should probably just use rigid body for everything here. What do you guys think? Okay, so no transform.translate on this guy. Let's go ahead and add our rigid body to the player. And we're going to do some interesting things with it so that it doesn't fall straight to the ground forever. So here's our rigid body on our player. And we are going to go to constraints and open up these constraints. We want this guy to move on the x-axis, but we do not want him to move up or down, so we're going to freeze the y position for this person. So he can't fall, he can't jump, he's stuck there. And we want him to rotate around his y-axis, but we don't want him to rotate on the other two axes. So this will constrain him, her, it, whatever you like. And we are going to use, what are we going to use? Well, let's use transform.add relative force. Not transform, I'm sorry. Let's get a reference to our rigid body. I'm just going to name it RB. And in void start, we can say RB is equal to this dot get component, rigid body, and semicolon. So let's remember that input.getAxis gives a value from 1 to -1. Ooh, okay, so here's another important one. How are we going to do this? Let's see. I guess we're okay for that. So there's this thing called fixed update, and it runs irregardless of their frame rate. If your frame rate is 9001, fixed update will still run the same speed every time. If your frame rate is 2, you will still have fixed update running at the speed that it does. By default, it's 50 times per second, or 0.02 seconds. So that's how many times fixed update runs. You can change that to be more or less. You can even change that to say, hey, if your frame rate gets too low, calculate less on fixed update and divide everything. But essentially, we want to make sure that if our frame rate is at 100, we're not adding force 100 times per second, but that we're always adding the same amount of force irregardless of frame rate. So I'm going to use rb.add force add relative force actually. And on the x-axis, nothing. On the y-axis, nothing. On the z-axis, input dot get axis vertical. Go ahead and see if this works. By pressing the arrow keys, or by pressing WASD, sorry, just W and S, it should move your cube. And I can see that it's moving a few people's cubes. Yeah, going backwards and forwards, good. It's probably a little sluggish. But you can see that it speeds. Does it speed up over time, or does it find a max speed?
I think, yeah. But I think it hits a certain time.
Yeah, I think it does have a max speed. Hard to tell as it gets farther away. Okay, so here's a little test for you. Use the scripting API to find out how we're going to rotate it about the y-axis. We'll only do this for a minute. And if you find it, just shout it out. Unless you're Seth. Be quiet, Seth.
Is it the horizontal one? So just input data horizontal?
So the input will be that, but what are we going to do to our rigid body? So search for rigid body in the Unity reference, and then find out what's going to make it spin. Yes?
So I may have missed the bit where it like already knows to look for the arrow keys.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll go over that in a minute. Does yours work?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, you're good. I'll go over that in a minute. So everyone's looking at the rigid body documentation. There's a minute up. Let's see, Unity, rigid body. Let's look under not properties. Those are our variables. Let's look under public methods. There's a lot of good options here. Add explosion force. Add relative force. Add force at position. Anybody see anything good? Yeah. Wait.
If relative force is moving in a direction, would relative torque be turning?
It would. Torque is what we want.
Okay.
So torque is most of us know torque from engines, right? Engines rotate, and that's how much torque they have is how much like turning power they have on the engine. We're going to add torque. I don't know if it's going to matter whether it's relative or not. But hey, that's not going to hurt anything, is it? So let's go ahead and go back to our code. You can read up on add torque. Adds a torque to the rigid body relative to its coordinate system. Force can be applied only to an active rigid body. Wakes up the rigid body by default. If torque size is 0, then the rigid body will not be woken up. We don't have to worry about those. And you can read here that add relative torque accepts a vector 3 of torque and then a force mode of force, which we should probably look up force modes and see what they do. Wow, that's a big example. So there's force mode, using a continuous force on the rigid body, considering its mass. Can I rotate this over? Good lord, this thing is long. So acceleration mode converts the text fields into floats and updates the rigid body's force. Force mode, continuous force. Impulse mode, which involves using the rigid body's mass to apply an instant impulse force. Occasionally you want, instead of a continuous force, like an instant force, in which case impulse is a good use for that. Okay, so back to our code. We have rb.add relative torque, and this time we're going to go about the y-axis with input.getAxis horizontal, and then comma 0.
The turning for you? It's like a bumper car spinning around.
Yeah, we'll tighten up the controls in just a minute. And does it have a maximum rotation?
I think it does.
It seems like it doesn't keep rotating faster and faster beyond a certain point. Yes.
Does get harder and harder to stop though. Okay. Oh yeah, it is.
Oh.
Because you're using add relative force instead of add relative torque.
Oh.
Yeah? Good. Okay, I want to try. Wonderful. And driving in the correct condition. Whew. This is nuts. Very sensitive. Okay, so let's work on the sensitivity of this guy for a little bit. All of the settings we want are in the rigid body. So its mass is going to be how much inertia it has, how long it takes to accelerate, how long it takes to slow down. So the more mass, the more you'll have of that. The drag as well will be how fast you slow down, how fast you stop. And this angular drag is when you're spinning, how fast do you go back to 0 spin. Now, if we adjust these, we will also have to adjust our speed of moving forward and backwards and our rotation speed. For example, why don't we try setting the drag to 1 and the angular drag to 0.25. And then go ahead and hit play and see what you get. My thought is that it might not move at all. It should stop a lot faster if you can get it to move. And also rotating should stop a little bit faster too. So if this is too slow, go ahead and build a public speed and maybe like a rotation speed, rot speed. And then multiply your inputs by that number. And let's go ahead and add a range. Let's see, I'm going to add a range for my speed from 1 to 20. And so my default speed will be set to 1, and my rotation speed will be set to 1 by default. And then we can edit those values in the inspector.
Well, I'll give you a nice.
It sounds better than it was. Oh, it's gone. Forever.
So when it comes to the feel that you're looking for, you're just kind of looking for the ultimate in control. If you feel like, oh, this is sluggish, make that faster. If that makes it too fast, or if it slides around too much after that speed, just add more to the drag and just really dial in these numbers. It'll take experimentation to find the right thing. But essentially what we're looking for is, I enjoy just driving around this scene. So I'm going to set my speed to 20 because that looks pretty good. I'm going to set my rotation speed to 10 to see what that does. Whoa, way too much rotation speed. Oh, that's because I haven't changed. No, I did change my drag. Interesting. Okay. Okay. Mm-hmm. And, we do want that asteroids of, sliding a little bit. And if we go true asteroids, we're going to slide forever, and that's going to be real frustrating. Hmm. 1.5, let's make you back to 2 again, but let's increase your speed a little bit. So I feel like I wanted to add my drag to 2 and my angular drag to 1. And I might even take my angular drag to 2 as well. if you can pull off some awesome like car skids where you rotate all the way around and then go the other direction, that might be a pretty good feeling.
What do you guys think? What are you noticing? What values do you have? Do you like angular drag of 8?
Yeah, I like the more tight control.
Okay, yeah, not a lot of spinning. And you've got a lot of power on your rotation too, so it's a real fast turn. It's good, I like it. What do you think, John? Yeah? Seth, what did you pick?
High drag, high speed.
Uh-huh. That's good. Good. How about here? Yeah, everybody's picking high drag on the angular drag.
It just spins so short.
It does spin way too much.
You don't want to target.
You don't want that. That's not good.
Just have a 0G mode where like everything just keeps going, nothing has drag.
Flies this off. And this is all stuff that we can adjust in code later with the press of a button. So maybe we could have the 0G mode in Star Citizen, space video game flying, right? You fly forward, but if you let go of the throttle, you like slow to a stop. And they have an option to press like caps lock and just like keep coasting. So you can actually, if somebody's chasing you, go into coast mode and turn around and just shoot them while you're flying backwards. It's pretty ridiculous. But yeah, that could be an option we could make pretty easily. We can just call this Star Citizen, but released Citizen.
So Elite Dangerous?
Right.
Actually complete citizen.
Okay. Oh crap.
Copy and paste your values.
Okay, so before you turn play mode off, you can right click on the rigid body and copy component. And then so say I found, you know, the values that I like, and say there were actually quite a few files. I think that was set to 1.5. Was angular drag 2? I've ruined everything. Okay, here's that. Whew, that is not. Oh, I set this to 2. And 15, 16. Okay, so I can copy the component, turn play mode off, and then paste the component values, and that'll get me what I want, so that I haven't lost all the work I did in play mode. Thanks for the reminder, Seth.
How do you get your camera to follow it without...
Good question. Good question. So if you want your camera to follow you in the scene view, you can hit play. And notice that it doesn't follow. Oh god, and it's still broken. What are you doing? Oh, because I didn't paste these controls. Okay, hold on a second. 2, 16, there. So, camera doesn't follow you. You can select this, and with the player selected, press F twice. And now, when you click back on game mode, it will follow you. I think there's another way to do that. I was reading about it on Twitter. There's a hashtag for Unity tips, but I cannot recall the other way to do that. I've always just found it in the scene, double tapped F, and then played the game somewhere. I feel like what I'm lacking at this point is like a reference for how fast I'm moving or how far. So I figure it's time to add like a grid. So one of my favorite things to do when I'm building is search for a UVW grid under images and then find just the prettiest one. There are several good ones I've used over the years. This one's pretty retro. I'm kind of into it. So save image as. Nice. Whew, that is bright. Now you can kind of get a feel for like how closely can you turn? Can you turn on a dime? We could probably add some obstacles and see if we could slalom through the obstacle course. But this'll work in a pinch. Part of your homework is definitely going to be adding particles to this. That'll be awesome. Okay, what do we need next? If you guys want to find your grid, that's a good idea. Just search for UVW grid on Google Images and find something you like.
Wait, how'd you get it to center on the thing again?
So,
Because you said something about double tapping half, but I tried that and it didn't work.
okay, so select your object.
Is it right there?
Yeah, double tap F. So you don't have your game in a different tab. So you have to be able to see both. So move your game down to the bottom where mine is. Or do that, that's fine too. Because when you have to select your game tab in order to play, in order to get input. So here in your scene view, double tap F, then click back on your game view. I'm not in play mode. Hey John, you having issues? Yeah, okay. Try to get you.
So I already downloaded the game.
Downloaded it. Okay, control. Sorry, Windows key. Alright, and then there's your UW. Drag back to this folder. Yep. I'm never done with this window. Just drag that in. That might be on extreme
back to the Google. Which one did you pick? Okay, this one. So its size is 180 by 180, which is tiny. Try that one. You ready for what's that one? Yeah, let's get that one. Is that one okay? Okay. Just put that test on this for a second. And then a couple other things to go with shaded. If you want, you can scroll down here and adjust the tiling. So if you change that to 2, you can get even more detail. Okay? Okay. So what do you guys think? What should we do next? Everybody's got a map. We've got movement down. Look, feels all right. We should probably work on the player controller a little bit more. So let's talk about super asteroids for a second. What do we want to do movement-wise? How about like a boost? Like an instant boost, right? So you could be like going straight and you turn around and ka-chunk at the very last second and then instantly zero out your velocity and go in that direction. Does that sound fun? Yeah. Okay, anything else we want? We can't do jumping over things. But a boost would be nice. How about that zero gravity mode? We want that one too? It's not gonna be hard, like
No.
okay. So let's have those two modes in addition.
This can be a kind of state machine. Raise your hand if you think you could make a switch statement right now. Okay. Let's make one. I will walk you through it. Actually, you know what? It's probably time for a break. Do we only have an hour left? Yeah.
That's an hour fast.
You guys want to take a break?
Sure.
Okay. Let's take a break.